Okay, welcome to another episode of Positive Parenting with Astrology. I am your host and resident Gemini, Maria Riegger, and I am super excited at having our guest here today, Dove Hotep, who is a coach, um, and she helps women entrepreneurs and a practicing astrologer. Not only that, a practicing evolutionary astrologer, which if you have followed this channel for a while, you'll know that I talk a lot about Pluto and Scorpio, and the evolutionary astrology fits right into that. So I'm super excited. Dove, thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks. I'm excited for our conversation.
Awesome. Dove and I met in a group, entrepreneur group, and we've already talked about this. We had a really good conversation. I really enjoyed it. I could have talked all day. So I wanted to bring some of this content to viewers. I know this is of interest. So I know you coach women entrepreneurs on not only to be more successful in their businesses, but also how to manage their emotions. And within that practice, you are an evolutionary astrologer. And I want to talk about how you incorporate that, because my most of my knowledge about limited knowledge about evolutionary astrology comes from Jeffrey Wolf Green's books on Pluto. And I'm going to simplify this, but he talks about Pluto representing the soul in the chart holder, and the house and sign position of Pluto, as well as the aspects Pluto makes to certain planets, and the sign and house position of the North Node and South Node inform the evolutionary journey of the chart holder, and also can inform kind of the evolutionary posture of the chart holder in this life, kind of what their inclination is. So I is uh, that how you bring in evolutionary astrology in your practice, or how do you practice it? Or what does it mean to you? Like if somebody were to ask you, a neophyte were to ask you what evolutionary astrology is, like how would you explain that?
I would say I'm a little bit of a different bird, being an Aquarius South Node. Our South Node being what I teach is actually our personality, and it's actually the way we've been thinking about our sun our whole life. Our sign, our sun, is actually our South Node. And so when you really get to know your South Node deeply, you actually get to know yourself really deeply. And you start to be like, oh my gosh, here is what I'm doing all the time is my South Node by house and sign. And so I do evolutionary astrology differently as well, but definitely in the vein of Jeffrey Wolf Green's teaching and not the Stephen Forrest. I
Mhm.
feel like he's the one that channeled and brought it through to us. I'm not saying Stephen Forrest didn't do lovely work and doesn't have his own beautiful um contributions to astrology, of course, his lyricism and poeticness and all of that, but I think it was from him that I read, about how the moon can be that ghost in the sky. It's just so different all the time. And I just love that imagery because it is. Sometimes it's a day moon and you're like, what the hell's the moon doing out? But there it is. But I definitely, for me, evolutionary astrology, like I had been going through my whole life, all these experiences. I have eighth house Plutos. I have a smoldering, very evolutionary Pluto, you know, and I have a smoldering Pluto, always having this deep, like smoldering and questioning and seeking and probing. And when I found evolutionary astrology, all of the question marks that had been hanging out in my consciousness from studying astrology from all of these different teachers were finally answered. And what I love about my particular journey is like I had the experiences myself before. It wasn't somebody like telling me. It was like me finally putting like words to my experiences and being like, oh, yes, this finally speaks what I've lived. And for me, what I love about evolutionary astrology, I guess just a simple through line, and I'll throw it back to you because like we've said, we can both go on, is that for me, I think about the soul and the personality. The soul self, is our intuition. It's the self that is part in the body, part, invisible, out of the body, and can see around all the obstacles and corners. It's the self that came in and incarnated into this life to act out its evolutionary goals and intentions to grow and learn and what have you. And sometimes for some people that can look like sitting by the beach, and for other people that's a lot of challenges and difficulty and contrast. And others have a mixture. Others are in the consensus status quo kind of like world and trying to get to the top of that ladder of the earthly plane world. Like there's so many. As infinite as consciousness is as infinite as experience can be. And then there's a personality self, and that soul self incarnates, takes on the body and the personality, and our personality body is that vehicle for our soul to be in this earthly plane existence and hopefully do some growth work. Because what people don't understand is that we're groomed to think that life is about having children, career, achievement, accomplishment, all those things, but it's really actually just about evolution.
Right. That's interesting that you say because you're a Taurus sun and everything, not everything, but a lot of the traditional astrologers, when they talk about Taurus energy, they talk about following a more predictable path. Of course, the sun sign is not the only thing going on in the chart. We know that. And as you just said, that's interesting. So by personality, you mean ego or is it something a little different?
I say ego, personality, same thing. Yes, we
Okay.
could talk about them as separate things. I mean, you can really just get in the weeds about this stuff. I like to simplify, simplify, simplify down so that we can just start somewhere. For people who
Yeah.
really have like gone in deeply, then we can go down the rabbit holes. But I think just to simplify it for people, personality, ego, same thing. Mind and ego, same thing.
Hmm.
Emotions, intuition, same thing.
Hmm.
However, a lot of people sort of confuse their emotions for their fears and their wounds. And they're saying, oh, my intuition said not to do this, when really it's their fear speaking. Yeah. So
I think you've hit on something really important. I want to put a pin in that. That's such an important distinction to make because people they talk about gut feelings and gut reactions and so much of that what they're describing is actually like you just said fear or they're acting from a place of fear not of an intuition like I just feel like this is the right thing to do right now. It's fear and it's managing the environment or the circumstance, managing, controlling, maybe in a codependent way, the environment or the
it's
circumstance because, right. And sometimes we have to do things despite the fear to,
And I want to give people, like, it can be that fear, it can be a maladaptive coping or
yeah.
protective mechanism. And I want to really let people know there's always a reason why.
Hmm.
And so it's not that it's wrong or bad, because maladaptive feels like, oh, bad, like judgment, right?
Right.
But, that was a very intelligent part of ourselves that developed that for whatever point in our life that it did that. But later on, it's not helpful anymore. And that's when we have the opportunity to finally grow and heal and resolve.
Exactly. When I work with clients, that's I like to make that distinction. Like I like to tell them, let's not think about your past conditioning as harmful, right? It may have been helpful, like you just said, it may have been helpful at some point. Today, is it helpful for you? And usually it's not. So that's why they come to, work with coaches like us, right? To kind of change that behavior and those triggers and work on those things. Um that so Jeffrey Wolf Green talks about this conflict the individual has between individuating and then coming back to source. Is that kind of how you see it? Do you see that a little differently? It's that conflict about wanting those two things and then so much of our life experience is dealing with that conflict.
I think that it depends on the context, and I think
Okay.
certain contexts people are going to deal with that. I think that's one of those things where it's like high Neptunian stuff. It's sort of like
Yeah.
the Celestine prophecy or Madame Blavatsky's work, where people talk about like your thoughts create your reality. Yes and no. Like it's a both. It depends on the context, and we can sort of be unhelpful to ourselves to like hold to something so vehemently, or without the greater context, or to know like what context it applies and what context it doesn't apply,
Hmm.
so I feel like for a lot of Pluto 12th house people, they can tend to sit on that precipice throughout their lifetime. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is really why that resonates with you, because you said,
Yeah.
right, your Pluto's in the 12.
Yeah.
They can really sit on that precipice hardcore throughout their
Yeah.
life with that sort of like, I don't want to merge back in with source, because like I'm going to dissolve my ego, dissolve
Hmm.
my meanness.
Hmm.
And there's an importance to our meanness. Our meanness is letting the soul act in this earthly plane. And if you've ever had a spiritual awakening, the floors and the walls and the ceilings all disappear for a little while, and you're like, damn, I never realized how free I was. And it's so free that it's almost like too free. It's almost like
Hmm.
I need some sort of guidelines with which to be able to act or make a decision or have contrast in some way. And
Yeah.
so I think that a 12th house Pluto person really like deals with that a lot more than a lot of people. That Neptunian factor. I think the average person probably isn't battling that in their psyche a whole lot. I think there's probably a million other things, mostly like emotion issues with emotions is like the
Mhm.
underlining thing. And you have to realize that the emotions are Pluto, right? Pluto has a heart-shaped iceberg on it. And I love it that's heart-shaped because it's reminding us that emotions are not dangerous. They're not something we need to fear. They're our allies, they're our messengers. They're trying to come through our body, drop
Mhm.
off a really important message, signal, indication,
Mhm.
indicator light of something, and then move through. But they end up getting stuck in our
Mhm.
emotional field because we've never, been taught how to handle our emotions, which is why I created the emotions method. And it's just three simple steps, but within each step, what like my clients find out is a whole world. And that world takes a little bit of a journey to really integrate it into your life as a lifestyle because we were taught to suppress, escape, and intellectualize our
Right.
emotions.
Right.
And Pluto Scorpio is emotions. Scorpio is that whole world of, and I know you know this, but Scorpio is that whole world of the emotional landscape. A lot of the Scorpio archetype is about fear of abandonment, fear of emotional
Mhm.
abandonment, fear of emotional, neglect or betrayal.
Right.
And that Scorpio world is like very much the world of the underworld,
Mhm.
black magic. It's the metaphysical world, psychological world, detectives probing,
Mhm.
questioning. It's all of the like what's underneath the rock and all the bugs underneath there, but the earthworms underneath the ground make turn the soil to make it nutrient rich, and
Right.
so like that iceberg that's literally on the planet Pluto is like the iceberg, all the stuff going on underneath, all that subconscious material that we tend to be scared of.
Right.
But when we actually face it, we get the
Right.
greatest gift of our empowerment because Pluto really is truly about evolution, therefore self empowerment. And you talked about Taurus being this fixed earth sign, the most fixed of all the zodiac signs. But my Aquarius is my South Node. That's who I am. So that's why my sun is what we're meant to become. It's not who we are yet.
Right.
It is our
Interesting.
inner motivations and drivers, but it's what we're meant to become over the arc of our lifetime. I have 4 planets in Taurus actually, so I'm super Taurus, but my Taurus presents in a certain way, and this is something I like to teach people. And I know we're sort of covering a lot of territory here, but this is something I like to teach people is that if you think about yourself and you think about all the planets, like the little symbols of the planets, and they're all inside of you, sort of like in a house, all these different people in a house with their
Mhm.
different opinions or goals. That's what it's like. That's what it's actually like inside of you. All the planets have a different level of being in your personality. So your Pluto, your soul, and then your rising, your moon, and your south node, they have really high amounts of activity going on in yourself. And a lot of people aren't necessarily connected to their soul as much,
Mhm.
like you and I aren't, but most people are very connected to like their personality self and what's going on, but they haven't named it
Mhm.
through realizing that they're not their sun, they're their south node.
Right. So when you describe the South Node to somebody, it's who you are in this lifetime? How would you?
Your south node, it's many things, but it's very much your personality self
Okay.
in this lifetime, but it's also that personality self of lifetime after lifetime. It's that ego structure from for all the lifetimes that pertain to this lifetime. Because we have thousands of lifetimes or what have you, but only a certain amount of them pertain to this one and are the arc of what you're working on in this
Mhm.
lifetime.
That's interesting because Jeffrey Wolf Green talks about that. He also talks about the Pluto polarity point, like as
Hmm.
being which is the opposite. So if you have Pluto, I have Pluto on the Pluto and Libra generation, so I have Pluto and Libra. So the polarity point is in Aries, which makes a lot
Hmm.
of sense because I spent the first half of my life people pleasing and trying to be everything to everybody. And as I told somebody, actually told some friends at a group session yesterday, group coaching session, I said, I'm going to be selfish for the rest of my life. Once I launch my kid, I will always be there for him in some capacity. But after that, or notwithstanding that, I'm going to be selfish. I'm not going to be living for anyone else. So that when I reread that this week in preparation for talking to you, I said that makes a lot of sense. That
I
makes a lot
love
of
it that
sense.
you brought up so much the Pluto polarity point, and it's really just a horrible name. I call it the soul's goal when I talk to my clients so they
That's a
can
better one.
grasp
Yeah,
it better. It's our soul's
yeah.
goal. Basically, it's the opposite sign in house of your Pluto. And so if your Pluto's Libra, like you said, what in 12th house, so
Mm-hmm.
then you're a 6th house Aries. And so it's that Virgo Aries Pluto polarity point. Your soul's goal is this Virgo Aries. So Virgo, like, and that's the other thing people don't get is the sign is this huge spectrum of what it could be. You like nobody is all of those things, or the
Right.
goal isn't all those things. It's usually a couple of key ones of that sign. So with Virgo, prioritizing, organization, being in the here now reality, where the 12th house is very much in the ephemeral and the dreaming and the creating world, off escaping,
Yeah.
escapism is a difficulty there. And so it's like I gotta be in reality, and it's hard, and also it's very good at flowing, but there's this request to like be able to calendar a little and
Hmm.
prioritize a little and like stick to something over time dedicatedly, which is hard for Pisces energy. It is
Hmm.
hard for 12th house energy, gosh. And
Yeah,
so
and it's hard for Geminis too. Let me tell you,
yeah, Gemini's so ambulatory,
I just
bouncing
want to
all
have a
over
good
the
time.
place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have similar energy. I have a stacked third house. I have a Gemini moon, so I'm
Oh
just very
yeah.
Gemini heavy. So yeah,
Oh
I
man.
work out. Sixth house people, like if it's your Pluto polarity point, your soul's goal, or
Yeah.
your North Node, you usually need to work out every single day to expel that energy and to help with that.
That resonates a lot because I do work out pretty much every day. My son will tell me, he's like, "Mom, you're really irritable. You need to go to the gym. You need to go to the gym." I'm like, "You're right. I'm going to the gym." He's like, "Good, meditate or something, but go to the gym, do something." So
Yeah.
yeah,
Can I
that. Go ahead. Yeah.
and so since you brought up the Pluto polarity points, I know this whole I fear that saying that term loses people, unfortunately, because people are
Yeah.
like, what the fuck does that mean? So
Right.
if you can just think about your soul's goal, everybody's got one. It's the opposite of your Pluto. So it's your soul's goal. But I love to talk about, if you think about who is alive today, there might be a couple centigenarians, maybe like three on the planet that have Pluto and Gemini. And so their
Hmm.
soul's goal is Sagittarius, but most of them are dying off. And so we have the Pluto and Cancer people are still alive. Some of them are in their like 70s. And then we have the Pluto and Leo people, and they're starting to move up into older age. And
Yeah.
then we have the Pluto and Virgo people, and they're heavily active in the collective, heavily, at that age where they're heavily active. Still a lot of Pluto Leo people are heavily active. And then there's the our generation, the Pluto Libra people, heavily active. The Pluto Sag people are finally kind of coming up to that like 30s age and so forth, 30s to 20s or so. Before Sag, the Pluto Scorpio people are behind us. And then if you haven't noticed, I'm going to stick this in real quick, the Pluto Capricorn generation, all of these 15-year-olds that have 1 million followers and have businesses that are full-blown businesses and millions of followers, it's because of their Pluto Capricorn.
That is my son, and let me tell you, he runs his own online businesses. Like, it's crazy. Since he was like 11 or 12, he's been like flipping digital products, flipping shoes. When I tell that to other adults, they're like floored. I'm like, yeah, we used to watch Shark Tank, all the time. And now, like, I made him take a financial accounting class with me over the summer so he wouldn't sit idle all the time. And he's like, Mom, I already know all about this stuff. And I'm like, okay, explain this. And he explained it. I'm like, you do know this. It's just,
They
it's
know the
crazy.
earthly, yeah, they know how to climb the earthly ladder. They know how to do earthly, and make the material earthly world work, and like money and business and all that kind of stuff. They get it. They just get it because their soul self, the
Right.
underneath their personality is that Capricorn energy that's what Capricorn's great at. But to finish what I was like, this idea that I love to talk about. So if you take the Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sag, which I would say are the main players, right? In the
Yeah.
collective, our soul's goal is then Pisces, Aries, and Taurus and Gemini. So
Hmm.
that's our goal. That's what we're trying to do as a collective, is Pisces through Gemini.
Hmm.
Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini. So then what are we trying to do? Well, Taurus is self-empowerment. Gemini is, we could say the thesis is experience and like ideas and like
Hmm.
that whole being able to turn that into wisdom. We could kind of go into there. Aries is about autonomy and having a unique self. and knowing yourself through your own self,
Mhm.
not through other, like Libra tries to do. And then, that Pisces of like a transcendental value system versus the earthly plane value system or the man-made value system, and also like humility
Mhm.
and also truth, discerning truth from falsehood.
Yeah, that's great to point out as we move into we're in Pluto and Aquarius, so the polarity point is Leo, or the soul's goal is Leo, right? So that's interesting to think about. And these are things that you don't talk we don't hear a lot about in terms of the soul and our evolutionary priorities. So I this is another interesting way of looking at the chart. So I get a lot of questions from parents, and I first of all, I love getting this question because it shows me that the parents are becoming more conscious, thinking about the kids as separate entities from us with their own journey, which is true, right? It's a whole conscious parenting movement. They ask me all the time, "Here's my kid's chart. How do I support my kid through their emotions, their goals, through the tough time? How do I support them?" And I love that question. Is there any guidance you can give parents using what you've just talked about to support their kids through this journey?
I guess my two biggest things I would say are, the first one is let them have challenges, let them make mistakes, let them learn and grow. Like help them, like look at when you see it coming and they're heading towards the brick wall, and what's coming, to stop preventing them from having their experiences. Their soul is trying to learn, and we only learn through experience. They have to have that. Otherwise, they can't learn and grow. Now, you can help mitigate it being so horrible, as horrible as it could be, or like, obviously teaching, learning, it's like, you're going to grab your kid's collar if they're like about to step off a 20-foot wall or something, you know what I mean? But it's like so many parents are trying to be like, you know, so frustrated and exasperated by their, South Node Scorpio kid, like who has a Taurus North Node, needing to experience everything, like Taurus, has to, you have to learn it. You have to have challenges to get self-empowerment. You cannot get self-empowerment by somebody else telling you that.
Mhm. Or
Words
yeah,
just don't teach. The other biggest thing is for parents to get down to eye level, obviously when their kids are younger, but all the way up, and say, "Oh, you're feeling XYZ. You're feeling sad. Oh, you're feeling sad. And let them feel what they're feeling. Oh, you're feeling anger. Well, let's talk about how we can express that. Like, let's go punch the punching bag. Or maybe we can have an area where we can throw glass and clean it up later. Or we can go throw eggs or tomatoes or something. Or like we can take a towel and ball it up and hit something that's not going to break, that we have permission to hit in this moment, in this container. Like you're feeling anger. Let me help you to express that. That's okay. Like helping kids with emotions.
right.
Let them have emotions, help them to learn to identify them, feel them, and release them. That's the 3 steps of the emotions method.
Absolutely. And that resonates a lot because in my house growing up, so I'm the oldest of three, we were raised by a single mom. So my mother could not tolerate any emotion that was not neutral agreeableness. If you were too sad or angry, she didn't want to deal with it. Very dismissive, or she would get angry at you for having the emotion. And if you were too happy, she would cut you down and say something to make you less happy, right? And
Sounds like an
and
arc. Sounds like an arc
yes,
in the
you are 100% spot on. I've talked about that publicly. Actually, I'm talking about that next week on a different podcast.
My
Um,
Yarkar is like solid.
yeah, it's just how it is. So, yeah, and I realized that later in my life, as I did this work, that had surrounded myself with people like that could not handle any emotion. Oh, that was like, as soon as you said, "Hey, I felt really disappointed, or I'm having a tough time because," and look, I'm a Capricorn moon. I'm not crazy about emotions either, but I've learned, like you said, I've done the work and I've learned to honor them, work through them myself, and I had no greater teacher than my Scorpio sun kid, right? So yeah, so I realized what I did as I was doing this work, that I had surrounded myself with people like that could not handle any emotion, that would deflect, that would just disappear, and I'm like, I need new people around me, right? So it's interesting, and I've as I pay attention to this, I notice that a lot of people now are like that. They cannot handle when you say I'm disappointed or I'm having a tough time. Uh, some people are good about validating that, as you just explained, and some people are like, well, here, let me reframe that for you. Okay, the reframing is fine. Like I get it, but it would be nice to have some empathy first. Like what we give to our kids. Like I know you're not a parent, but like that's one of the first things I learned as a parent. It wasn't about fixing stuff for my kid. It was about being present and empathizing with him and just being there while he was going through something. And if he wanted to talk, I was there and I would validate. I'm really sorry that happened. That's a really bad thing. I totally understand how you would feel upset. You have a right to be angry about that.
I
Any
mean,
reasonable
even just
person.
a even just
Yeah.
a very present, like looking in their eyes with them energetically, uh-huh, is so validating and witnessing.
Hmm.
Non-judgmental, being present, listening to understand rather than listening to reply.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Which is I had to learn to do that because I the world moves too slowly for me. So like I realized I was like talking too fast and acting too fast and I had to like slow
Slow
down and give
down.
space. Like you said, like slow down and give space. Because kids especially are really intuitive about knowing when you're physically present but you're not mentally present. They know. Like you just said, they
Yep.
totally know. So the
Especially
trick is
Scorpio Pluto. Yeah.
I
They
cannot
know
tell
way
you. You're
more than
not listening, mom. I'm like, I'm
they
looking
know
right
way
at you,
more
but you're
than they
not
acknowledge
listening.
they know, and they know more than you're ever gonna realize they know.
It's
Yeah.
crazy how much they know. My kid would tell me things that I would when he was younger, and I would ask him, "How do you know that?" I don't. And he would literally say, "I don't know, mom. I just know."
Yeah.
And I was like,
Because
"This is,
Scorpio osmosis.
yeah,
It osmoses
yes,
from everywhere. It
yes,
just
yep,
takes things in and is
yeah,
able to utilize it, just like a plant.
yeah." Which is why it's so important to teach those kids how to handle their emotions because they feel everything. They feel everything and
Everybody
absorb
needs it.
everything.
The
Yeah,
whole population
yeah,
needs to learn the emotional field because
yeah,
everybody's mentalizing all the time. And the
right.
mental field, and I had I teach a breakthrough that I developed. It's called the Dimensions Breakthrough. It's my proprietary work. And it's that there's four planes of existence, and things like theosophy and different different areas, the words escaping me, talk about these different like dimensions or call them fields or planes, the atman and all of this, but that's not helpful. What I talk about is for us to actually utilize in our life day to day to help ourselves. So it's called the
Hmm.
dimensions, and there's the energetic dimension, and then there's the physiological dimension, so our nervous system, our physical body, all of these elements of that. And then there's the emotional dimension, and then there's the mental dimension. And I use the words plane, field, dimension interchangeably. I typically tend to use the word plane, but I call it the dimensions. And it helps people to understand that a lot of times we're stuck in our head, in our mind. We're in that mental dimension, and emotions are not a mental verbal thing, but we're always trying
Hmm.
to puzzle them out.
Hmm.
They don't make sense, they just arise. Emotions don't make sense. And the other thing about emotions is that they feel true. So when we feel the emotion powerless, we feel like it's true. So we're like scrambling to get away from it. We suppress it and push it down, and we get busy and we talk over it and we do anything but actually just sort of sit and be with it and understand, why it's coming up. And like, oh, I'm feeling powerless in the situation because I'm actually not getting my needs met. Emotions have so much information for us if we can just listen.
Absolutely. And that's a great lesson for parents is to teach the kids how to listen, not suppress the emotion, not to dismiss it, or not to intellectually argue your way out of it. Like, I should not feel, I used to do that. I should not feel this way because XYZ. Well, it doesn't matter what I should or shouldn't feel. Like you just said, I feel this way and I'm going to honor that, So that's a really, really good lesson for parents. What do you recommend or what can you share about protecting our energy? Because those of us, like you mentioned, Scorpio, they absorb everything. And those kids, I talk to so many parents who have Scorpio kids who have the same issue. Like I'm trying to teach my kid how to protect their energy. Is there anything you can share that would be helpful to get started on that?
Part of it is, really learning the energetic dimension. It's
Okay.
really like starting to do maintenance. We need to do maintenance on our energetic field, just like we take a shower for our body. We need to take an energetic shower. So we need to learn how to cleanse our energetic field of all of the emotional resonances and the energies that we pick up from other people and the projected emotions of others and the psychic attacks that are maybe intentional or maybe malicious, but they've happened and they've gotten in there. And we need to learn that. And here's the deal: people sort of get a little fearful or a little like victimized feeling around their energetic field, but you just have to go on the journey of it. We're talking about the invisible world. It's a gigantic, enormous realm. And you just start with simple learning things like there's roses, and you can imagine your auric field all around you, this bubble, and start to connect with that and start to try to make that more and more and more conscious. It's a journey to make what is like energetic conscious and get your
Hmm.
mental field to start to connect with your energetic field, and for them to sort of have the understanding between them. That's why our mind can go so crazy, is because it's feeling all of this energetic stuff, but it can't language it, it can't name it. And so a
Right.
lot of what I do is helping people to name what they're feeling, sensing, experiencing. And it's so helpful. It takes a lot of the monster out of it all. But you can have your auric field around you. This is a simple exercise, a great beginner's exercise. And you imagine in your mind's eye a rose machine that makes these big, big roses, real roses. Roses vibrate at the level of well being in a metaphysical sense. And you just imagine a rose, you take one and you blow it up really big in your mind's eye, as big as your body, and you put one on the front of your field, one on the back, and you keep taking a new rose out of the rose machine, put one on the side, one over here in your mind's eye, one on top and one on bottom. And then you take yet one more, and then you cleanse the whole inside of your field, maybe out, and then you send that rose about 10 feet away from your body, and you sort of watch it blow up like a firecracker. You can imagine it, going into the ground and flowers growing or whatever, and then you're done. It could literally take 30 seconds to do that anytime you're feeling, that feeling. And you got to start down the journey of it. Start down the journey of it. Eventually you can really start to sense other people's projecting their field into your field, and start to like sort of be like no, and sort of send their field back over them and make sure your field is stronger. Energetic work is so important, but it's a little tricky out there because there's Reiki workers that don't necessarily
Right.
aren't really actually doing pure clean energy. There's some that are doing great work, but they're sort of just doing basic level stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's the work I do in the energy realm. I heal past life issues, I heal the blocks and obstacles that you can feel there that are in the energy stuff. Nothing else is going to resolve that. You can only resolve the energetic field. So I do that work with clients as part of my coaching program. And most people do not have that skill, and it's not something I'm teaching. I just hope more people sort of get it out there and
Yeah.
start doing it. And I think there is. I've sort of seen some things here and there of some
Yeah.
people that are starting to understand these same things. We're all
Yeah.
tapping into the great quantum field with Pluto and Aquarius right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's yeah, that's amazing. I It's funny because like 10, 20 years ago I would have said energy work. Oh, this doesn't make logical sense to me, but I go to a physical therapist who does energy work. Certified physical therapist, does the cranial sacral release and does energy work. And she was recommended to me by somebody else locally, and it's
And so
amazing.
she's working on the physiological dimension with your physical
Yes.
body, which is also
Yes.
affecting your nervous system, but she's working in the energetic because she has figured out that there's something was missing from just doing the
Yes.
physical. People are still having issues. And that's
Yep.
what the dimensions is all about, is that it's really this missing layer underneath all the modalities. As people need
Hmm.
to learn, like, to heal and heal completely, we need to work in all the dimensions: mental, emotional, energetic, and physiological.
Absolutely. And I think even people, and I say this to people who aren't necessarily into astrology, I said, look, we could all pretty much agree that everything is energy, that people are made of energy. Your energy vibes with certain people, it doesn't vibe with other people. This person's energy is too negative, this person's energy is too much like I'm the victim. I don't want to be around that, right? So it's not that much of a stretch to get from that to this work that we're talking about, right?
I
The
mean,
energy
it's just
work.
that the overculture teaches a mechanized, linear, soulless world. I mean, and it teaches that because it has every, it just wants robots and worker bees and
Hmm.
controlled, non-autonomous beings. And we've woken up as a population. There's always been awakened people, across time, but we've had the en masse awakenings that have been going on, particularly since the 80s. 87 was a
Hmm.
big one, and then 2012 and 2020, and they just keep happening. And the population is awakening. And I don't know. I think it's pretty fascinating with what's going on with Uranus and Gemini. Obviously, Uranus is retrograded at the moment, but it's in Gemini technically for the next 7 years,
Hmm.
and Pluto in Aquarius. And it's interesting. I don't think people realize what's actually happening.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, uh, it's hard for them to articulate what's happening. They may
To name
feel
it.
some
Yeah.
shifts. Like I talk to a lot of people who feel shifts, don't feel the same, but it's difficult for them, especially if they don't work in these areas, difficult for them to articulate what's happening. So if they're open to it and I explain it, they're like, oh, that makes sense.
And if we go back to Pluto polarity points and the soul's goal of Gemini people,
Hmm.
Gemini is identification.
Hmm.
It's naming, it's languaging that which is not,
Right.
and the thing, like, people may have that sort of go in one ear, not the other, like, why is that such a big deal? But when you name something, you take the power out of it that it had over you to be this nebulous monster. When you name an emotion, it's not as difficult to start now
Right.
dealing with. When you name, what the abuser did to you, you're like,
Hmm.
oh, that's what it is. That's why this is. That's what this was. That's what that was. That's what that weird behavior was. That's what that twisted, warped, behavior was.
Right. I did an article on emotion labeling and how powerful it is, just what you're talking about, naming, identifying the emotion, and that the stress level reduces just by virtue of identifying and naming the emotion. So, like you said, it loses some power. Like you feel more uh in control, and you have more of your own personal power back when you can identify the emotion. Yeah, for sure, for sure. You mentioned blocks. I want to make sure we talk about this because energetic blocks, such a real thing. When I went to see my physical therapist for the first time, I said, I live in my upper three chakras, like always. I live here and I need to do the work down here. I need to like distribute the energy more evenly. So, but I know you work with financial blocks because you work with entrepreneurs, financial blocks and money blocks. And this is something a lot of people ask me about. And in fact, I talked recently about financial boundaries for parents because it's easier than ever to spend money. And it's also, parenting is hard because we're competing with all these things that are trying to get our kids' attention. And so a lot of parents I think are struggling with boundaries with kids, especially financial boundaries with kids. And how do you begin that process of working with people who come to you about the money block issue? Like, what's
I
the
mean, my work,
modality?
it's very individual to the,
Okay.
I don't have these blanket things for just anybody, because it's not
Yeah.
how it works. People all have their own unique energy, money confuckeries. And I work with the individual, and my coach, my program has the main methods that I use, but it's tailored to that person. You can say basically a few things is that, people think about money in a finite way. Their
Hmm.
orientation is typically of a stress, lack, fear, worry type of orientation, instead of a I can create it orientation. Also, there's some real things, like, do they get their money from a job? Do they get their money from a business? Those are some, one of the biggest things is we can sort of like stop being so constipated around it, and stop being like so orientated towards the stress, worry towards it, because that energy is not the energy of creation, of flow, of
Hmm.
having. People sort of don't know how
Hmm.
to have money. Instead, they focus on like what's going to take the money, or
Yeah.
not having the
And the
money, or the
lack,
fear.
like I need more of it because I don't, they're stuck in that state of lack. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, as far as blocks, again, we're talking about four dimensions. So we have our
Okay.
mental money brain, how we think about money, and all of these beliefs that are often unchecked. And, I have to help my clients to create new beliefs. And so I do, a subconscious belief reprogramming technique that actually goes into the actual subconscious. It's not working at the conscious level because you can't change the subconscious beliefs from the conscious level. And it works in 3 days to 2 weeks. And you can just change a belief in 3 days to 2 weeks, like I am valuable, or I deserve money, or I deserve love, or I am worthy of money, or I deserve clients, or whatever. We find the beliefs and we change them at the subconscious level. But they have to get a hold of their conscious mind too. They have to start cleaning out the junk drawer
Hmm.
of their conscious mind. You can't sit there and be like spinning negatively about money all the time and then think that you're going to be in a good place about it, you know? And the other thing is we look at what the facts are versus their sort of internal drama, all the thoughts and feelings about money. Because most people don't know their facts. They don't
Hmm.
know their net worth. They don't know what they spend their money on mostly, for the most part. They don't know, what they want their net worth to be in 10 years. And doing that sort of helps them to start dreaming a little bit bigger and seeing more possibilities instead of so constipated over here. We look at, what they pay in taxes, what they pay, not getting into too much nitty gritty, more overviews, more
Hmm.
general understandings. People just don't tend to have that. They tend to be really avoidant,
Hmm.
or victimized around their money. And we
Right.
go from that to being super clean about it. These are the numbers. These are the facts. $2,508 in the bank account. Well, I got $5,000 of bills. Huh. That probably doesn't feel very good, but at least we're looking at it. When we're avoiding it, it's going to be bad. All bad
Yeah.
decisions. We can't get creative. We can't solve problems. We can't start to move the needle. And then there's definitely the energy component, of course. And I do a lot of, like, especially with women. Women have been suppressed for 5,000 years. We've been subjugated for 5,000 years. We had our, what was the witch trials? It was a land grab for our wealth as women. We owned land. We were, the medicine women. And so, now only 13% of women, I think 13 to 37% of women own property in the world. And, this stuff needs to change. Women need to make money and they need to stop not making money,
Hmm. Yeah.
and so there's a lot of past life work I do with women, healing and resolving all these energetic currents and issues and weird tangles and things like that. And as a psychic medium, I'm able to put that puzzle together and name that thing and see what it is. And we make it conscious and then we resolve it completely. Often it takes maybe 2 to 4 sessions on one particular little nugget issue. And then it's really dissipated and resolved. And people just get massive results. There's just no longer is just the like acute fear that they don't even know what it's about
Yeah.
because it was not in the
Yeah.
energetic realm. And then there's the nervous system, the physiological. We got to regulate that nervous system. People, nothing more than money dysregulates people like crazy. And people don't really know if they're regulated or dysregulated. And so, really developing that skill set. And it takes the journey. It takes the journey to start to figure that out and start to understand, because we're often habituated to being dysregulated.
Hmm.
And, we equate that to getting things done, or we equate that to, like getting up and moving and being active and all and
Hmm.
running around everywhere. But it's actually a dysregulated nervous system. And it's not where we're going to be able to create the highest results.
Right.
So there's these things I could say are sort of across the board with all people, but the unique puzzle I put together is very individual for each person and what their particular issue is with it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, we are constantly pulled in different directions. And I one of the things I try to work with clients is to embrace flow state, because a flow engagement is one of the core tenets of well-being. When you're engaged in fully concentrated in a task, and you're when you're constantly interrupted, psychic entropy occurs, and over time that is extremely dysregulating. You're constantly interrupted, you're dysregulated, and then you have more difficulty focusing. So yeah, that resonates a lot. And I say this as a Gemini, and I have a lot of different interests, but I try really hard to embrace flow state and make my home an environment where I can be more regulated and concentrate on tasks one at a time. That's hard to do because my son is a Gemini moon like you. So, and he has Mercury conjunct the sun. So it's a very strong energy in my household. But
When you start to
yeah,
get regulated, you start to crave it and you really start to really
yes,
value constraint. Because the
yes.
thing is, what a lot of people don't realize is the reason why they all of a sudden years have passed by and they've been working on the same things and barely have moved the needle on one thing is because they're not constraining. You
Hmm.
can't get a million things done, even if you're doing them consistently over time. You have to constrain down. And in business, it's so important to constrain down. And I talk about one of my signature, teachings and businesses is establishing versus established.
Hmm.
Most people don't realize how many things, like 20 things, 15 things, 10 things they have in the establishing phase, where it's not a habit yet. It's not a routine yet. It's not a known autopiloted, I know how to do this. I'm very comfortable with this. I've overcome my internal junk on it thing yet. It's not established. And so when we're in the establishing phase, we're clunky, it takes more time, energy, effort, it takes more thought, more emotional bandwidth, all of that. But we have 20 things in the establishing phase. Like, no wonder we're overloaded, you know? And so I help people to realize, like, let's bring that way down to like three things and work
Hmm.
on one thing
Hmm.
and get that really into like a state of established and really understand what your business minimums are. I have these basic business minimums, and you can't move something over to that, if you have too many things over here. We got to
Yeah,
constrain.
yeah,
So,
for sure. Yeah, for sure. No, I that definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's and yeah, part of that is people need to have better boundaries. You have to learn to say no to some things and even miss out on some things, and that's hard to do, but that's essential because otherwise you're just not going to accomplish anything. It's like you say,
see,
time goes by and then things aren't done, and then you're wondering why things aren't done, and that's yeah,
but see, that's the thing
painful.
is FOMO. People don't recognize a lot of emotions that are emotions, and that's something I teach in the book. The book will be coming out soon. In the Emotions Method book, there's a
Yeah, I was
full
going to ask
emotions
you.
dictionary in the book,
Nice.
and it's going to be so profound for people because it's really going to name the felt
Yeah,
state, not
yeah.
define a word that we use for an emotion, but really name a felt state. And FOMO, fear of missing out, is an emotion, and it's perpetuated in the culture.
Hmm.
And so when we really dig in, most people are not actually giving a shit about all these things, really. It's just they've internalized supposedly that they should.
Right,
And that stacked up on them. And then now time has just gone by and they're carrying this cloud
right,
with them.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And so your book, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the books. I want to ask you about that because I signed up to get a copy. I can't wait. I'm really excited about that. I want to check. All right, man. Time has flown by. I want to make sure I ask you, Dove, where people can reach you if they want to work with you and to get on your list so they get your book when it comes out soon.
Yeah, everything is at lightgoddess.com. Light Goddess is about women around the world rising and shining light and making this world better. And so it's lightgoddess.com. You can find astrology there or my coaching world there really easily. Also, if you're really into astrology and you want to go deeper with your chart, you know, created this workbook. Took me 4 years to make this and hone it and shape it. It's got a workbook in it, my 10 planets, where you can get to know your chart really deeply. And this is just volume one. I can't wait to bring out, the next 5 volumes or 4 volumes, but it's really, really helpful. People love it. And I think it's a great deep dive, but you can book astrology readings there, or if you want to consider working with me deeper, I've few spots available at any given time, typically for coaching, but
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for sharing all this really great information. I really appreciate it. So valuable.
thank you so much for having me on. It's
Thank you
super
very
fun
much.
conversation.
Thanks so much. I always love talking to you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Really glad to be here. Thank you.